She rushed into my shelter to escape the storm, then froze when she saw. Marcus Chen had been stationed on Kepler 442b for 3 standard months, and he thought he'd seen everything this godforsaken planet could throw at him. The mining colony had been abandoned for 2 years after the Zephyrian Trade Consortium pulled out, leaving behind only automated systems and one very stubborn human who refused to evacuate. The storm warning came through his comm system at 13:47 hours, its synthetic voice cutting through the howling wind that had been building all morning. Category 5, atmospheric disturbance. Sustained winds of 200 kilometers per hour, electrical activity off the charts. Marcus had weathered dozens of these storms in his reinforced shelter, carved deep into the crystalline cliffs overlooking the abandoned mining complex. He was checking the power coupling on his atmospheric processor when he heard it, a sound that shouldn't exist on this empty world. Footsteps. Heavy, urgent footsteps splashing through the rain-soaked ground outside his shelter. Marcus grabbed his pulse rifle from its mount near the entrance. Pirates weren't unheard of in this sector, and a lone human with valuable equipment made for a tempting target. The metallic door to his shelter stood slightly ajar, sealed only by the magnetic field generator that kept the toxic atmosphere at bay. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by what sounded like labored breathing. Not human breathing, something else entirely. Marcus had studied the atmospheric composition reports extensively during his 3-month isolation. Nothing on Kepler 442b could survive outside without proper life support, and certainly nothing large enough to make footsteps that heavy. Lightning split the purple sky outside, and in its brief illumination, Marcus saw a silhouette approaching through the driving rain. Tall, definitely bipedal, but moving with an odd lurching gait that suggested injury or exhaustion. The figure stumbled, caught itself, and continued toward his shelter with desperate determination. Marcus kept his rifle trained on the entrance, while his other hand hovered over the emergency lockdown controls. The atmospheric processors hummed reassuringly in the background, cycling the air and maintaining the delicate balance that kept him alive in this hostile environment. The magnetic field shimmered as something large pushed through it. Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger, ready to defend his sanctuary against whatever alien threat had stumbled upon his isolated shelter. What came through the entrance made Marcus forget every tactical manual he'd ever studied. She was unmistakably female, despite being unlike any species Marcus had encountered in his 15 years of deep space operations. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, her skin had a pale blue-white hue that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Elongated limbs moved with fluid grace despite her obvious exhaustion, and her face, angular and alien yet somehow familiar, was marked by exhaustion and something that looked distinctly like fear. But it was her eyes that stopped Marcus cold. Large, expressive, and a striking shade of violet that seemed to glow in the shelter's artificial lighting. Those eyes met his for a split second before she collapsed, her long limbs folding beneath her as she hit the metal floor with a sound like falling wind chimes. Marcus lowered his rifle slowly, his tactical training warring with basic humanitarian instincts. The woman, creature, person, was clearly injured. Dark fluid that might have been blood seeped from several wounds along her left arm and shoulder. Her breathing came in short, sharp gasps that fogged slightly in the cooler air of his shelter. She wore what appeared to be some form of environmental suit, though it was torn and damaged in several places. The material looked advanced, almost organic in its construction, with patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid metal. Whatever it was, it had kept her alive in the toxic atmosphere outside, though barely. Marcus set his rifle aside and activated his medical scanner, a handheld device that could analyze basic biological functions across most known species. The readings made him frown. Her body temperature was significantly lower than human normal, but her heart rate, or whatever pumped her circulation, was racing. The scanner detected cellular damage consistent with atmospheric poisoning, but also something else. Something that made the device emit confused chirping sounds as it tried to categorize what it was reading. The woman's eyes fluttered open, fixing on Marcus with an intensity that made him step back involuntarily. She said something in a language that sounded like crystalline bells mixed with winter wind. When Marcus didn't respond, she tried again, this time in what sounded like heavily accented Standard Galactic. "Please," she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in his chest cavity. They are coming. The hunters. I cannot run much farther." Marcus knelt beside her, noting how she flinched slightly at his approach. Up close, he could see that her injuries were worse than he'd initially thought. The tears in her suit revealed skin that looked like it had been exposed to acid or extreme cold. Whatever had hurt her, it hadn't been the atmosphere. "Who's hunting you?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice low and steady. His training had covered first contact protocols, though those had assumed much more controlled circumstances than an injured alien stumbling into his shelter during a Category 5 storm. The woman tried to sit up, winced, and fell back against the metal wall. "Korthak," she said, and the way she pronounced the word made Marcus's blood run cold, despite having no context for it. "Slave hunters. They have been tracking me for days." Marcus had heard rumors about the Korthak Confederacy, whispered stories from deep space traders about a species that raided outlying colonies for sentient beings to sell on the black market. The Galactic Council officially denied their existence, but Marcus had seen enough of the galaxy's dark corners to know that official denials meant little in the outer sectors. "How many?" he asked, already moving toward his weapons locker. 3 ships, she managed. "Maybe 4. They have, tracking technology. Very advanced. I thought the storm might mask my trail, but—" She gestured weakly toward the entrance. As if summoned by her words, Marcus's proximity sensors began chiming. Multiple contacts approaching through the storm. Large enough to be ships, moving with purpose despite the atmospheric chaos outside. Marcus felt a familiar calm settle over him, the same focused clarity that had gotten him through combat zones from the Rigel incident to the siege of New Canberra. He'd thought his fighting days were behind him when he took this mining assignment, but apparently the galaxy had other plans. "Can you move?" he asked the woman, already knowing the answer from the way she struggled just to keep her eyes open. Not quickly," she admitted. "The poison, it affects my neural pathways, makes movement difficult." Marcus nodded, his mind racing through tactical options. His shelter was well defended, carved into solid rock with only one entrance and equipped with military-grade shields. But against multiple ships with orbital capability, it would become a tomb rather than a fortress if he couldn't level the playing field. The woman watched him with those extraordinary violet eyes as he moved efficiently around the shelter, activating defensive systems and checking weapon charges. When he pulled on his combat vest, she spoke again. "You would fight for me? A stranger? An alien?" Marcus paused in his preparations, looking at her with genuine surprise. "You're a person in trouble. That's all I need to know." Something shifted in her expression, a look of wonder mixing with the pain and fear. "Your species, humans, you are not what we were told." "Who told you about humans?" "The Korthak. They said humans were weak, cowardly, that they avoided conflict and abandoned their own when threatened." She struggled to sit up straighter. "They said this made humans valuable slaves because we would not expect resistance." Marcus checked the charge on his pulse rifle and smiled grimly. "Well, they're about to get a very educational experience about human nature." The proximity sensors showed the approaching ships had slowed their advance, probably scanning for life signs or trying to pinpoint their quarry's location. Marcus had maybe 10 minutes before they identified his shelter as a potential hiding spot. "What's your name?" he asked the woman as he sealed the shelter's blast doors. "Lyrelai," she said, and somehow the musical quality of her voice made even her pain sound beautiful. "Of the Etherian Collective. Marcus Chen, formerly of the Earth Colonial Marines, currently of nowhere in particular." He activated the shelter's combat protocols, watching as automated weapons systems came online and shield generators began their charging cycle. "Lyrelai, I need you to stay low and away from the entrance. This is about to get very loud." Through the shelter's external cameras, Marcus could see the first of the Korthak ships descending through the storm. It looked like a predator made of black metal and angular hatred, its hull scarred by countless raids and its weapons already powering up for attack. Marcus had faced worse odds before, but never while protecting someone who couldn't fight back, and never against an enemy with such a reputation for cruelty. As he settled into position behind his defensive barricade, he caught Lyrelai watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Why?" she asked one more time. Marcus checked his rifle's targeting system and smiled. "Because sometimes a stranger isn't a stranger. Sometimes they're just someone who needed help, and you happen to be in the right place at the right time." The first Korthak ship fired, and Marcus's world exploded into light and sound and the pure, focused clarity of combat. She rushed into my shelter to escape the storm. Part 2. The first plasma bolt struck Marcus's shield generators with enough force to make the entire shelter shudder. Emergency lighting flickered as power systems automatically rerouted to compensate for the massive energy drain. Through the external cameras, Marcus watched 3 more Korthak ships emerge from the storm, their sleek hulls cutting through the atmospheric chaos like knives through silk. "Structural integrity holding at 93%, Marcus muttered to himself, running calculations in his head. The shelter's shields could absorb maybe a dozen more hits like that before critical failure. Not great odds against 4 ships, but Marcus had worked with worse. Behind him, Lyrelai struggled to prop herself against the wall, her violet eyes wide as she watched him prepare for battle. "They will not stop," she said, her voice barely audible over the humming of the shield generators. "The Korthak never abandon a hunt. Even if they cannot take me alive, they will kill us both rather than let me escape." Marcus adjusted his rifle's power setting to maximum and checked the charge levels on his portable shield projector. "Then we'll just have to make sure they don't get the chance." The second barrage came from multiple directions, coordinated plasma fire that lit up the shield matrix like a deadly fireworks display. Warning alarms blared as shield strength dropped to 78%. Marcus could feel the heat building in the shelter's environmental systems as they struggled to dissipate the massive energy discharges. "Marcus!" Lyrelai's voice carried a note of urgency. "There is something you should know about my people, about why the Korthak hunt us so relentlessly." "Can it wait?" Marcus replied, tracking the movement patterns of the attacking ships through his targeting system. "I'm a little busy keeping us alive." "No, it cannot wait." Despite her injuries, Lyrelai's voice carried sudden authority. "We are not merely valuable as slaves. We are what you would call psychically sensitive. Our neural patterns can interface directly with advanced technology." Marcus paused his tactical analysis, turning to look at her with new understanding. "You're living computers." "In crude terms, yes, but more than that." Lyrelai's eyes seemed to glow brighter as she spoke. "We can link with any sufficiently advanced system, enhance its capabilities beyond normal parameters. A ship with an Etherian navigator can travel faster than light without conventional hyperdrives. A weapon system bonded with one of us becomes exponentially more accurate and powerful." Another coordinated strike hammered the shields, 62% and falling. Marcus could smell ozone and burning circuits as his defensive systems began to overload. That's why they want you alive, Marcus realized. You're not just slaves to them. You're living technological enhancers. Yes, and that is also why I can help you now, if you will permit it. Lyra struggled to her feet, using the wall for support. Your shelter systems, your weapons, I can interface with them, give you capabilities your enemies do not expect. Marcus weighed his options quickly. Trust an alien he'd known for all of 20 minutes with control of his life support and weapons systems, or face 4 warships with conventional defenses that were already failing. When put like that, the choice seemed obvious. What do you need me to do? Physical contact with your primary computer interface and... She hesitated. Complete trust. When I link with your systems, I will also link with you to some degree. You will feel what I feel, know what I know. It can be overwhelming for non-Etherians. The shields flickered as another barrage struck home. 51%. Marcus could hear the Korthak ships repositioning outside, probably preparing for a final overwhelming assault. Do it, he said. Lyra moved toward the shelter's main control console with surprising grace despite her injuries. When she placed her long-fingered hands on the interface panel, the entire shelter seemed to come alive. Displays that had been dark for months suddenly blazed with information. System diagnostics ran automatically, optimization protocols engaged, and Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation at the base of his skull. Then the link established, and Marcus gasped. Information flooded his mind. Not just data, but understanding. He could suddenly perceive the shelter's systems not as separate components, but as parts of a living whole. The shield generators weren't just machines anymore. They were extensions of his will. The weapon systems responded to his thoughts as naturally as his own limbs. But more than that, he could feel Lyra's presence in his mind. Her pain, her fear, but also her determination and something else. A fierce joy at finding someone willing to fight beside her rather than abandon her to her fate. The sensation is temporary. Her voice echoed both aloud and directly in his thoughts. But, while we are linked, your defensive systems will operate at maximum efficiency. Show me your weapons. Marcus turned toward his weapons locker with new understanding. Through the link, he could feel Lyra analyzing each piece of equipment, understanding their function and potential in ways that bypassed normal learning curves entirely. Impressive, she said, both aloud and mentally. Human military engineering is more sophisticated than the Korthak reports indicated. These pulse rifles can be overcharged significantly beyond their normal parameters. Won't that burn them out? Under normal circumstances, yes. But I can regulate the energy flow, prevent cascade failures. Your people's weapons are built with remarkable redundancy systems. Through the external cameras, Marcus watched the Korthak ships forming up for what looked like a final assault formation. All 4 vessels positioned themselves at different angles, preparing to overwhelm his defenses with simultaneous fire from multiple vectors. They're getting ready to finish this, Marcus said. Then we will give them a surprise. Lyra's mental voice carried grim satisfaction. Marcus, your shelter has mining equipment stored in the lower levels, yes? Industrial plasma cutters, explosive charges for ore extraction? Marcus nodded, suddenly understanding her plan. Through the link, he could feel her consciousness spreading through the shelter's systems, taking inventory of every piece of equipment and integrating them into a comprehensive defense network. The mining charges are designed for precision work, Marcus said. They won't do much damage to armored ships. Not individually. But I can link them together, create a controlled chain reaction timed to occur just as the Korthak ships pass overhead. The explosion will not destroy them, but it will disrupt their targeting systems and potentially damage their shields. Marcus felt the mining charges activating throughout the complex below, their timers synchronized with deadly precision. Through Lyrelai's enhanced perception, he could track the approaching ship's positions with impossible accuracy. "Now we need them closer," Lyrelai continued. "They must be directly overhead when the charges detonate." "How do we get them to come down here?" "We make ourselves irresistible bait." Marcus felt Lyrelai's mental smile. "Drop your shields." "Are you insane?" "Trust me, Marcus. I can reinforce the shelter's hull directly, make it stronger than your shields ever were. But the Korthak must believe we are defenseless." Marcus hesitated for a split second, then reached for the shield controls. Every instinct screamed against exposing himself to enemy fire, but the link with Lyrelai carried absolute confidence in her abilities. The shields flickered and died. Immediately, the Korthak ships accelerated toward the shelter, no doubt believing their prey was finally helpless. Through the link, Marcus felt Lyrelai's consciousness spreading through the shelter's very walls, reinforcing the molecular structure of the metal and crystal, turning ordinary construction materials into something approaching battle armor. The approaching plasma fire struck the shelter's hull directly and bounced off harmlessly. "Impossible," came a harsh voice over the communication frequencies, speaking in heavily accented Standard Galactic. "No civilian shelter could withstand direct plasma bombardment." Marcus smiled grimly as he watched the Korthak ships descend even closer, trying to understand what they were seeing. "They're right where we want them." "Charges detonating in 5 seconds, Lyrelai announced mentally. "Prepare for weapons fire." The explosion, when it came, was nothing like Marcus had ever seen. Instead of a simple blast, the linked mining charges created a cascading wave of plasma energy that erupted from multiple points throughout the abandoned mining complex. The effect was like watching a dozen suns being born simultaneously beneath the earth. All 4 Korthak ships were caught in the plasma wash. Their shields flared and overloaded, their hulls blackened by the unexpected energy discharge. 2 of the vessels spun out of control, their pilots blinded by the massive electromagnetic pulse that accompanied the explosion. "Now," Lyrelai said, and Marcus felt the shelter's hidden weapon systems coming online. What he had thought were decorative elements on the shelter's exterior unfolded to reveal military-grade plasma cannons, their barrels glowing with contained energy. Mining equipment throughout the complex reconfigured itself into improvised missile launchers. Even the atmospheric processors joined the battle, their powerful electromagnetic fields focusing into coherent energy beams. "How is this possible?" Marcus asked, watching in amazement as his modest shelter transformed into a fortress worthy of a military installation. "Your species builds redundancy and adaptability into everything," Lyrelai replied, her mental voice warm with admiration. "Every piece of equipment has multiple functions. Every system can be repurposed if necessary. It is a very human approach to engineering, expecting the unexpected and preparing for it." The counterattack was devastating. Plasma cannon fire lanced out from a dozen different positions, striking the disoriented Korthak ships with precision that bordered on supernatural. Through the link, Marcus could feel Lyrelai's consciousness guiding each shot, calculating trajectory and timing with mathematical perfection. The first Korthak ship exploded in a brilliant fireball, its hull breached in 3 places by concentrated fire. The second managed to get its shields back online, but found itself under assault from angles it couldn't defend against simultaneously. "Retreat!" The harsh voice over the communications channel had lost its confidence. "All ships, immediate withdrawal! The human has military-grade defenses!" But Lyrelai wasn't finished. As the surviving Korthak ships tried to flee, she activated systems Marcus hadn't even known existed. Tractor beam projectors hidden in the mining equipment locked onto the escaping vessels, holding them in place while the improvised weapons continued their deadly work. "No," Lyrelai said, her mental voice carrying cold fury. They have hunted my people for too long. Today, the hunt ends. The second ship fell to sustained plasma fire, its engines destroyed and life support failing. The third managed to break free of the tractor beams, but limped away into the storm, trailing atmosphere and debris. The fourth ship, however, made a desperate choice. Instead of fleeing, it turned back toward the shelter, all weapons firing in a final suicidal assault. He means to ram us, Marcus realized, watching the damaged Korthak vessel accelerating directly toward their position. Not if I can help it. Lyra Lee's mental voice carried grim determination. Through the link, Marcus felt her consciousness reaching out, not just to the shelter's systems, but somehow beyond them, touching the wounded ship itself. What happened next defied Marcus's understanding of technology and physics alike. The attacking Korthak vessel simply stopped, suspended in midair as if held by invisible hands. Its engines screamed at maximum power, but it couldn't advance another meter toward the shelter. "How are you doing that?" Marcus asked, awed by the display of power. "Korthak ships use neural interfaces for their primary controls," Lyra Lee explained, strain evident in her mental voice. "I am overriding their systems, but I cannot maintain this for long." Marcus looked at the suspended ship through his rifle scope. Through the link, he could feel exactly where to aim for maximum effect. His enhanced pulse rifle, supercharged by Lyra Lee's modifications, would have more than enough power to penetrate the vessel's weakened shields. "Let him go," Marcus said quietly. Lyra Lee released her hold on the ship, and Marcus fired in the same instant. The overcharged pulse bolt struck the Korthak vessel's power core with surgical precision, triggering a chain reaction that consumed the entire ship in seconds. The storm began to clear as debris rained down on the abandoned mining complex. Through the link, Marcus felt Lyra Lee's consciousness withdrawing from the shelter's systems, returning them to their normal configurations. The sensation left him feeling strangely empty, as if he'd lost a sense he hadn't known he possessed. "It is finished," Lyra Lee said aloud, her voice weak but triumphant. "The Korthak hunting pack is destroyed." Marcus set down his rifle and turned to look at her, seeing her with new understanding. "You could have taken control of my weapons, my systems, any time you wanted. Why didn't you?" Lyra Lee met his eyes with that striking violet gaze. "Because taking control and being invited to help are very different things. One creates slaves. The other creates allies." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding more than just her words. In the past hour, he'd learned something profound about trust, cooperation, and what it meant to stand with someone rather than over them. Outside, the storm was finally breaking, revealing stars he hadn't seen in days. But Marcus found himself in no hurry to contact the colonial authorities or arrange for Lyra Lee's passage off-world. Something told him their story was just beginning. She rushed into my shelter to escape the storm. Part 3. 3 days after the battle, Marcus found himself sitting across from Lyra Lee in the shelter's small common area, watching her work on what she called a long-range communication matrix. Her injuries had healed with remarkable speed, another advantage of Etherian physiology, and she'd spent most of her recovery time studying his equipment with the focused intensity of a master craftsman examining new tools. "Your people's technology is fascinating," she said, her long fingers dancing across a collection of components she'd somehow coaxed from his mining equipment. "Not the most advanced I have encountered, but perhaps the most adaptable. Everything can be modified, repurposed, improved upon. It speaks to a very particular mindset." Marcus sipped his coffee, one of the few luxuries he'd brought to this isolated posting. "We're good at making do with what we have. Comes from being the new kids on the galactic block, I guess. When everyone else has better tech, you learn to get creative with the basics." Lyra Lee paused in her work, violet eyes fixing on him with an intensity that still made him slightly uncomfortable. "I have been thinking about that." about humans and what I learned during our connection." "What did you learn?" "That the Korthak were wrong about your species, but not in the way I initially thought." Leirale set down the component she'd been adjusting and leaned back against the wall. "They said humans were weak and cowardly. Having fought beside you, I know this to be false. But they also said something else, that humans were dangerous because they formed attachments too easily, cared too much about strangers and outsiders." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "And they thought that was a weakness? Most species in this galaxy operate on very clear hierarchies of loyalty. Family first, then tribe, then species, then perhaps close allies. But humans..." Leirale shook her head wonderingly. "You extend the circle of worth protecting to include almost anyone in need. It is simultaneously your greatest strength and your greatest vulnerability." Before Marcus could respond, the communication matrix Leirale had been working on suddenly came to life, projecting a three-dimensional star map into the space between them. Dozens of points of light pulsed in various colors, connected by flowing lines that seemed to represent shipping routes or communication networks. "What am I looking at?" Marcus asked. "The current state of the Korthak slave trade," Leirale replied, her voice taking on a grim tone. "Red lights are recent raids, yellow are staging areas, blue are processing centers where captives are held before sale." Marcus studied the map, noting with growing alarm how many red lights there were, scattered across dozens of star systems. "This is massive. How many people are we talking about?" "Conservative estimates suggest they hold nearly 50,000 sentient beings across their network. Etherians like myself, but also Zenthari scholars, Rigelian artists, even a few humans from outer colony worlds." Leirale's hands clenched into fists. "The Galactic Council refuses to acknowledge the scope of the problem because stopping it would require resources they are unwilling to commit." Marcus set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. 50,000 people. Yes. And now that they know their hunting tactics have been compromised, they will likely accelerate their operations before word spreads. More raids, more captures, more families destroyed. Leirale gestured at the map. "This network I destroyed on their ships contained detailed intelligence on their entire operation. Locations, schedules, security protocols, everything needed to hit back." Marcus finished quietly. "Yes. But such an operation would require significant resources, military expertise, and coordination across multiple systems. It would need someone with experience in asymmetric warfare, someone willing to take enormous risks for people they have never met." Marcus stood and moved to his equipment locker, pulling out a datapad and beginning to make notes. "How many ships would we need? What kind of firepower? And more importantly, how do we get close enough to these facilities without triggering their defenses?" Leirale watched him with an expression of wonder, mixed with something that might have been admiration. "Just like that? You would commit to such a mission based on the word of an alien you met 3 days ago? 50,000 people, Leirale. Some of them probably kids." Marcus looked up from his calculations. "You're right about humans. We do form attachments easily, but it's not really a weakness if you think about it. It means we never have to fight alone." Over the next several hours, they developed what Marcus privately thought was either the most audacious rescue operation in galactic history or the most elaborate suicide mission ever conceived. The Korthak network was vast and well defended, but it had weaknesses that could be exploited by someone with the right combination of skills and technology. "The key is their reliance on neural interfaces," Leirale explained as she modified another piece of Marcus's equipment. "Every ship, every facility, every weapon system in their network is connected through quantum-encrypted channels. If we can get close enough for me to interface with their primary communication hub, I can propagate a virus through their entire network simultaneously. And then what? We can't fight them all at once, even with their systems compromised. We do not need to fight them all. We need only to create enough chaos and confusion to allow the captives to escape. Most of the beings they hold are not warriors, but they are intelligent and resourceful. Given the opportunity, they will find ways to flee or resist. Marcus studied the star map, identifying potential targets and escape routes. We'd need to hit multiple locations simultaneously to prevent them from reinforcing each other. That means splitting up. Not necessarily. Lyra Lee smiled, the first genuinely happy expression Marcus had seen from her. There is something else I have not told you about Etherian abilities. We can maintain psychic links across vast distances, coordinate actions in real time without conventional communication. If I can find others of my people among the captives, you could create a resistance network using their own prisoners. Marcus grinned. I like it, but we still need a ship, weapons, and some way to get close to their facilities without being detected. I may have a solution to that problem. Lyra Lee activated another section of the star map, highlighting a cluster of systems near the galactic rim. Before my capture, I was part of an Etherian exploration fleet studying gravitational anomalies in this region. If any of my people escaped the Korthak raids, they would have retreated to these coordinates. Marcus packed quickly, loading essential supplies and weapons into a cargo container, while Lyra Lee completed her modifications to his communication equipment. The plan they developed was dangerous and probably impossible, but Marcus had learned to trust both Lyra Lee's abilities and his own instincts for tactical operations. As they prepared to leave the shelter that had become their temporary fortress, Lyra Lee paused at the entrance, looking back at the place where she'd found refuge from the storm. Marcus, she said quietly, when I first stumbled into your shelter, I thought I had simply found a place to hide until the hunters moved on. I never expected to find an ally, much less someone willing to risk everything for strangers. Like I said, it's what humans do. Marcus sealed the shelter's systems, setting them to standby mode. Besides, this isn't really about strangers anymore, is it? Anyone being held by the Korthak is part of our circle now. They made their way through the abandoned mining complex toward the landing pad where Marcus's modified transport waited. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind clear skies and the distant glow of Kepler 442b's twin suns on the horizon. As they lifted off, Marcus caught one last glimpse of his shelter carved into the crystalline cliffs. It had been his refuge for 3 months, but looking at it now, he realized it had become something more important. The place where a human and an alien had learned to trust each other completely, and in doing so, had perhaps started something that would change the balance of power in this sector of the galaxy. The nearest jump point is 6 hours away, Marcus said as they cleared the atmosphere. Once we make the transition to hyperspace, there's no turning back. Lyra Lee settled into the co-pilot's seat, her violet eyes already glowing with the soft light that indicated she was interfacing with the ship's navigation systems. I have spent months as a fugitive, hiding and running from an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. The idea of turning back never occurred to me. Marcus engaged the autopilot and leaned back in his chair, studying the star charts that Lyra Lee was projecting on the main display. Dozens of systems, hundreds of worlds, and somewhere among them, 50,000 people waiting for rescue. Any idea what we're going to call ourselves? He asked. This rescue operation, I mean. If we're going to be conducting military operations across multiple systems, we should probably have a name. Lyra Lee considered this for a moment, her expression thoughtful. In my language, there is a phrase that translates roughly to those who stand between the storm and the shelter. It refers to beings who choose to face danger so that others may find safety. I like it, Marcus said. Though in Standard Galactic, that might be a bit wordy for operational communications. Then perhaps simply Stormwatch? Leerily suggested. Marcus nodded, feeling the rightness of it. Stormwatch. An organization dedicated to standing between predators and their prey, to ensuring that no one who sought shelter would be turned away. As their ship approached the jump point, Marcus found himself thinking about the chain of events that had led to this moment. A routine mining assignment on a forgotten world, a storm that drove a fugitive to his door, and a decision to help a stranger that had somehow evolved into the beginning of what might become a galactic rescue operation. "Lyrelai," he said as the hyperspace generators spun up to full power. "That first night, when you asked why I was willing to fight for you, I don't think I gave you the complete answer. No, it wasn't just because you were someone in trouble. It was because when you looked at me, you saw someone worth trusting with your life. Do you know how rare that is? How powerful?" Marcus watched the stars shift to lines of light as they entered hyperspace. "Trust like that changes you. Makes you want to be worthy of it." Lyrelai was quiet for a long moment, watching the flowing patterns of hyperspace through the ship's viewports. "Among my people, we have a saying. The greatest storms often bring the most unexpected gifts." Marcus smiled, understanding both the words and the deeper meaning behind them. Outside, hyperspace flowed around their ship like a river of light, carrying them toward whatever waited in the outer systems. Behind them, Kepler 442b fell away into the darkness, but the shelter Marcus had carved into its cliffs would remain, ready for the next traveler who might need refuge from the storm. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the grand rescue operations they might attempt, or the enemy networks they might disrupt, but the simple act of ensuring that anyone seeking shelter would find it, and anyone offering trust would find it honored. The storm had brought Lyrelai to his door, but what came after, partnership, friendship, and a shared commitment to protecting the vulnerable, that was something they had chosen to build together. And as their ship carried them toward the outer rim and whatever challenges awaited there, Marcus knew that whatever else happened, they had already achieved something remarkable. They had proven that sometimes the stranger rushing to your door isn't running from something you should fear. Sometimes they're running toward something you were meant to become.